Mhm. All right, we are live, is it? Sorry, we got some technical details we're sort of working over at the time. Currently, PZ is having quite a bit of difficulty with his audio. It's I don't know if you can hear him over in YouTube land. PZ, give a bit of a holler just in case. Like I don't have the YouTube thing live right now, so I can't even verify that. But yeah, technical issues over here. So I'm just gonna temporarily sort of act as host, and what's gonna be sort of a okay, hopefully not just a primal scream of woe, woe is us and wow, 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 but hopefully sort of giving some positive things we could potentially sort of do in the aftermath of this election here as well. Let's see, with us, we've currently got four people joining. PZ has been around, obviously, here. Hopefully, can sort out his audio issues and get things along in time. Actually, yeah, at some point I might check on the YouTube stuff just to see what works. With me as well too is Great American Satan. You want to introduce yourself?
Oh, Great American Satan, y'all know me. Blog at freethoughtblogs.com/gas, and I am trying to do stuff I'll talk about later.
Fair enough, fair enough. And we've also got William Brinkman with us here as well. Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm William Brinkman. I write the Bowling with Babbler blog, freethoughtblogs.com/babbler. I write urban fantasy books, but we're not going to be talking about those today.
Awesome. All right. Well, as the token foreigner on the call, I got to say, okay, what the hell happened? Like, you guys had one job, and it just no. Okay, let's get your thoughts on what exactly sort of happened here overall. We can maybe get into some theories for why it came out the way it did.
I don't think I don't think there was one specific cause. I think racism and sexism, homophobia played a role. A big thing I'm considering is the role of right wing media, like the blogs and podcasts. So they're kind of taking place of traditional media, and it might be one of the reasons why a lot of voters had the perception that 2020 was better than the economy 2020 was better than it is currently. So a little Russian disinformation, and not as much as it was in the previous elections. So
I think there was probably a lot of that still, but yeah.
okay, maybe not as much of a factor, but yeah, they're definitely trying.
I would say that with the sheer amount of people that didn't show up for Democrats, because it wasn't a matter of Republicans getting more votes, they didn't. It was a matter of
Mhm.
Democrats just being all like, never mind. It has to have been multifactorial, so like you don't
Mhm.
necessarily want to go like, oh, it was you guys there, but it was but there's I know for a fact that voter suppression was part of it because I had a conversation with a elderly Native American woman in Arizona who was within a week of the election being told that she couldn't vote because of some issue related to her social security number. And
Yeah.
but she talked with the Social Security Administration and everything checked out there. So what you do in Arizona? Now
Mhm.
being elderly, she and an elderly Native American person, she might have been somebody who was going to vote for Trump anyways. I don't know, but she was getting her vote
Mhm.
suppressed, and she was in a demographic that they like to do that to. So um, yeah, that was a factor. Uh, the the billionaires have bought like every inch of media in every part of the country, like, and they're like just the entire sense of reality is completely manufactured. Uh, Algorithms on social media that actually benefit us by keeping Nazis off of our feeds actually like make sure that if people that might be sympathetic to Nazi talking points see nothing but Nazis on their feeds. So it's a combination of the algorithms on all the social media platforms, like every inch of media outside of that being bought and sold by conservative billionaires in the United States. They're living in an altered reality that just has no where they can't see the harm, and they see a lot of harms that are not real that are being just drummed into their heads. I have a day job where I end up talking to a lot of old people from all over America, and there's when some viral video goes around faking like some immigrant got like a gigantic paycheck from the Social Security Administration, they believe it, even though it's patently untrue. It's like political theory, outright lie, or sorry, political games, like outright lies, propaganda. Like these things get. There's no way. There's no curb on any of that. There's no check on for truth in anywhere that it matters in any kind of meaningful way. Um, if you were a reasonable, totally reasonable and compassionate person, but not very, a little slow on the uptake, a little bit like, uncritical about the stuff that comes and it gets in your face, and you were living in a red area of the country with mostly red like conservative relatives, you would quite probably believe that there's some massive issue, border crisis, and all sorts of like just insane, fucked up nonsense, because that is all you will ever fucking see. So that's a very big factor in it right there. But still, like as big of that, as many people as stayed home, the thing I'm gonna gravitate to as being the biggest explanation is misogyny. I mean, we voted for somebody who was like a black person with a Muslim name, once upon a time. But it's not for her, and like compare that to what happened with Hillary, and it's just all like, I mean, Hillary had some other factors going on, but like, but with Harris, it's just I'm close to 50 years old, and my entire life, the subject would come up from time to time, as early as when I was in like junior high. If there was a woman voting running for president, would you vote for her? And there would always be one or more women or more girls in the room, people my age that are out there voting now, that would say no. Like misogyny, not just of men, it's not just like MRAs and shit, but it's just the pervasive shit mythology that's just like in everybody's fucking head. That's like feminism was what set off the whole right-wing backlash in the first place in online spaces, and it's just never there may have been some ways in which it looked like they were winning for a minute, but they never did. That like misogyny and patriarchy and stuff are still like ridiculously dominant forces in our culture. And if you're just like a slightly thoughtless, conformist, middle of the road person, even if you're like all of your values are democratic, you might see woman there and be all like, "Ready now," because that's what this country's like.
Right.
I don't know. I have some thoughts on that too. That was actually sort of leaning that way too, but I had a different sort of spin on it. Part of it is because to sort of figure out what the hell happened and all that, I immediately sort of tried diving into, okay, what exactly do the exit polls say? Like, you would imagine, okay, if this is generally a case that, women would not vote for, a women candidate, then we should actually see sort of like a shift within who voted for what, with the actual sort of exit polls that are there. And yet, I've got them sort of sitting up on another screen over here. I've actually got the ones from NBC as well, though I've also got CNN to compare against as well too. And you basically what you find is everything was sort of static when it comes to that. Men. Men. Actually, okay, white women vote. 55% of white women voted for Trump in 2020. This year it was 52%. Whereas, for Harris, it was 44 to 47, so like a 3 point change. That's not a huge sort of swing, although since the margins were so narrow, you could maybe argue that was the case. The other problem, too, is exit polls are still polls, so there is margins of error on here, too, so you kind of have to take them with a bit of grain of salt. You look for how white men voted, for instance. It's 61% for Trump in 2020, 59% for him in, 2024. You look at black men, there was 79% for Biden Harris in 2020, 78% for that. There's often sort of this common trope of, blaming, black people for not showing up and voting. Well, black women voted, I think, 90% for Biden, for Biden in 2020. They voted 92% for Harris this time around. So, you're not, even though it is only like a 2% change, you're not going to get much above that ceiling.
You got,
even
mathematically speaking, though, like what effect would it have if people that were dubious of women stayed home? what I like there's too many reversals in this for me to like really track that, right? Like if you have like people that want, oh, well, Billiam disappeared. Um
That's right.
um okay, so if you had like a pool of people and then they the certain median
Mhm.
average beliefs and stuff like that, and the people that are distrustful of women were the only people that were taken out of that, what would happen to the remaining figures? Like, would they be that far off? I'm not sure. And also like in what way? Like it might something have a counterintuitive effect. Math's like that sometimes. Gonna need a bigger brain than me to figure that out.
Well, that's the thing. You would expect some sort of swing. So, say there's sexism was involved in general and all that, and there would be okay, like there would be a positive swing one way or the other for that. But we're not really seeing any sort of swing at all. However, I do think you're correct to actually pin this on sexism, racism, etc., and all that. Because what was the main sort of selling point of the Harris campaign overall? You can't vote for Trump because he's sexist, racist, etc. If you're sexist or racist, that's not a negative. Like, if you're sort of informed of that, subconsciously you're just sort of going, what do I actually care?
That's
You
that
know,
may
so
I don't think that that's a factor for the majority of Republican voters. I think most Republican voters don't identify with racist or sexist, except to think of those as being words that are used to insult conservatives.
Mhm.
Um, but that again would still have an effect in their favor, which is like, oh, well, the Harris campaign is just insulting us relentlessly, so therefore, you know.
but they weren't actually insulting them. They were basically assuming that these people thought that racism and sexism was bad.
Mhm.
What if that assumption was false? That in fact this was not a sort of a proper thing to sort of they did not actually find that disqualifying with Trump itself. Essentially,
Right.
the idea is, from a sort of a liberal bias and all that, we have baked into our heads sexism bad, racism bad, etc. and all that. There is a fair number of people there who either do not believe that, or they find ways to sort of they subconsciously think that and sort of apologize their way around it. The idea being that oftentimes what we sort of think conscious. There's one theory about cognition and all that, and that essentially the sort of the conscious brain is sort of explaining. It's really the subconscious brain that's in control, but it's the conscious brain that sort
Mhm.
of explains things.
Right.
There's been experiments where they'll sort of force people to sort of do something, to do something inadvertently, and people will actually come back and say, no, no, I actually meant or intended to do that, even though that really was not the case. So, this is what I'm sort
Yeah.
of thinking is the final sort of like, hey, Trump is a sexist, racist, misogynist, and all that. It wasn't landing, and it wasn't actually sort of converting people over. And
I
then,
think I get what you're saying there. I think that my point is that like in addition to that segment and possibly even more so, there's a segment of the population, the conservative population in the United States that doesn't think that they're racist or sexist at all and hears those words and thinks that's an insult for conservatives. So they just think that she's just saying like y'all are stupid and we hate you, right? So it was like they take that as an insult, and as regard, that's so. I think that that's like it was working against her on that level as well. This is what
Yeah.
Obama was trying to avoid by
Mhm.
like never mentioning race and like being like real hands off about that stuff. Was that
Right.
basically he knew that if he said that like some people might not vote against me because they're racist, then immediately people would be like, oh, look at this radical uppity yada yada,
Mhm.
well, and
because they
that's
take it as an insult.
Mhm.
well, and that's a good point. I mean, you remember that the whole reason Biden sort of dropped out of the race is there was this big giant pushback that, oh my goodness, he's so old, he's frail. There's signs of cognitive dropping and all that. It's a terrible, terrible thing. We can't actually sort of have him on there.
Right.
And then people voted for Trump, who,
Mhm.
I mean, by any objective measure, is far worse on that scale than
Mhm.
Biden. There's definitely a double standard here.
Right. Double standard, and I think also right wing media has been done very it's pervasive, like the fake local papers, Sinclair News, Sinclair Network, and so they helped create the perception that things were much better in 2020 somehow, but and then today, and then people seeing like, oh, the economy's really terrible, and Harris represents the old administration. She's not distancing herself from Biden. So
I think I kind of remember when Biden got elected, it really powerfully felt like it was a 1-2 punch of COVID happening, being like making people feel like Jesus, the world's ending, and then
right.
wildfires. There was like
Mhm.
so many massive wildfires that year, that election year, that like people were just living under an orange haze, like, watching the world
Right.
burn, choking on it, and also in addition to that, having a pandemic going at the same time. So like
Mhm.
those were just like, and then like the other thing is Biden could hark back to Obama positively. People would be like,
Mhm.
oh, I want things to be like they were under Obama. Well, that guy was there for Obama. So he had a lot of things going for him, and maybe that was the
Mhm.
only reason he was able to edge out the momentum of the pervasive right wing machine.
Yeah. And okay, and then also there's also the protests, and in Chicago area there was looting, and I remember being in the suburbs, and there's like all the panic cries of oh, there's these looters coming to our suburb, go hide. We have to close Target because Target's a Target.
Why did they
And
make that their symbol?
yeah, yeah. So that, I mean, but yeah, it was like 2020 was chaos, and I'm just amazed that it's been spun to somehow as a better than it is now.
There's like no fucking memory for any of this shit. And also people
Right.
just don't know how things work. They're like right now
Mhm.
very few people are voting. So what we're doing is relying on like the people that are willing or able to vote, like
Mhm.
being uh, knowledgeable about the issues and stuff like that. And that's basically fucking impossible.
Right.
So I mean, like it's like I said when like Biden was like getting the benefit of having been associated with Obama. This is like just like this is magical thinking. So like which is
Mhm.
stand-in for like not being able to really know all the particulars of what's going on and stuff like that. But it's just all like economy good back then, therefore this, okay.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, this can be a return to normalcy. Hey, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. And of course, like, yeah, this that propaganda machine, like campaigning for this from the split second that like the Biden won, right? So
Mhm.
Right.
I, I think that the exit polls, as much as that could potentially be somewhat abstractly interesting to some folks, don't interest me because I just like I don't think those are really indicative of shit at the end of the day. It's
Mhm.
really hard to know. I mean, like how much have they ever correlated with the reality of what happened? It's really sometimes they have, but I think that was probably mostly when there was like a really decisive thing happening, and that's just like I mean, hear that I don't think they came close to like calling this margin.
Actually, it was
No.
fairly close. Like
Really, I
oh
wasn't
yeah,
following it, so
538.
yeah, you tell me.
I've been sort of listening to the sort of centrist kind of things like 538 and all that. I do
Mhm.
sort of load them for that, but they do at least at least try and distill sort of the polling stuff and all that down as best they can. I don't think I've heard a lot of their post-election commentary yet, but if you sort of look at what exactly the polls predicted, even for like 2020 or 2022, where there was a lot of like, oh, the polls missed this, the polls missed that. No, actually, they weren't that far off. Basically what happened this time is the polls were off by about 2%.
Mhm.
But because the polls were basically sort of 50-50 for the most part, and that 2% consistently broke one way, in this case,
Mhm.
polls were sort of overestimating how much support Democrats had. That had sort of a catastrophic effect, especially for a first past the
Right.
post system, where it just
Mhm.
shoved everything, right into the Trump column itself.
Mhm.
And one thing I don't think is really that hasn't sort of been brought up much in these sort of discussions, but is worth bringing up as well is Trump got 74 million votes this time around.
Mhm.
Kamala Harris got 70 million. If you look back in history, it's been about 32 years or maybe even 36 or so
Right.
since a Republican won the popular vote, and it looks like
Mhm.
Trump is on track to do the same right now,
Right.
which is wild. Because I mean, if you sort of think about that, like, okay, how exactly does that work?
Okay, how many people voted for Trump this time versus last time?
It turns out, actually, I looked that up, and it was approximately 74 million this time, approximately 74 million last time.
Mhm.
Okay, All right.
So he
So
basically did.
what that tells me is that like he didn't it really isn't a case of like the Republicans becoming more popular or cool or him gaining
Yeah.
any more support at all. It's
Mhm.
entirely about the Democrats having lost it.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, technically speaking, since the United States has actually grown a little bit in the past 4 years, that's technically a net loss for Trump. 74 million, a few years ago would have been a greater per capita part of the country than it is now.
Right.
So technically, it's sort of a slow decay.
Mhm.
It's just last time when Biden was elected, he got something like 81, 82 million votes versus, Kamala Harris's 70 million this time.
Mhm.
It's obscene. It's fucking
Yeah.
obscene. The stupidest thing is that like I mean like okay, I'm trying to I know people the thing that I'm becoming aware of is that there are a lot of people whose limbic system, amygdala, whatever, they're neural, they've got anxiety or stress or depression, whatever. They've got problems that biologically make it so that bad news and catastrophizing fuck up their entire lives.
Mhm.
And nobody, it doesn't seem like anybody's being conscious of that. So I'm trying to do that with
Mhm.
balanced with realism on my blog.
Right.
So I'm doing a lot of like a series of posts. I'm going to run out of posts like probably next week, late next week, and about they're trying to like give people like a sense that this isn't necessarily the end of the world. That said, I'm trying to be realistic about it because I don't want to like to tell people
Mhm.
shit that isn't true because then they'll like go
Mhm.
like, well, this encouragement's just a hot air. It isn't meaningful. So
Yeah.
I am being trying to be realistic about that. And realistically speaking, it's quite possible this will be the last election in the United States for like, 30, 40 years.
Right.
In which case the random blithe fuckos that stayed home, like just like you thought they were a lot of these people were just coasting on the idea like I'm going to vote for people that are different from whoever was in power when I was being annoyed. Like, oh,
Mhm.
inflation happened when Biden was a president, so I'll go for the
Right.
other guy. Well, regardless of what
Mhm.
happens during Trump's term this time, you may not have a fucking chance to do the same stupid voting strategy you've been using for the last couple of decades. So,
Uh-huh.
congratulations.
Yeah, that actually gets to
Yeah, I can hear.
one other thing, which I think may have actually played into this election too, is I mean, we've all sort of been aware of the boy who cried wolf. This is the
Mhm.
classic folk tale of, a boy keeps saying, "Hey, wolves are coming, wolves are coming."
Mhm.
After a while, people panic at first, and then they go, "Okay, no, this kid's pulling bullshit and all that." And eventually, the
Right.
wolves do come and they eat everybody, right?
Mhm.
Well, you can imagine that I mean, how many elections in a row now have we been told this is the most important election you'll ever vote in for Americans anyway?
Mhm.
Like this is literally the third time in a row where that has sort of happened.
Right.
And I think there's a fair bit of fatigue for people going like, "Oh my God, you can't just keep saying that it's really the
Mhm.
case." The sad thing is, it's true. The
Yeah.
wolves really were at the gate.
And
You would
and
have
the last three elections were the most important ever. Yeah.
Yes.
they legitimately were. This is true. The problem, though, it's very easy to sort of fall into that, oh, you keep saying that every time sort of thing, and it's
Mhm.
saying it's not true. But it is true.
Yes.
Your
Especially,
gradualism post. Like people should pitch your blog right now. That's going to be a useful.
Okay.
This is relevant.
yes.
Mhm.
Especially since I didn't properly introduce myself. If you're not aware, H.J. Hornbeck, my blog is Reprobate Spreadsheet, and I've actually gotten good traffic on my a post on gradualism, essentially. We're sort of pointing out that basically we've sort of had, a ton of, things about, okay, a Trump presidency is going to be the worst thing ever. It's going to, rob you of your children. It's going to kick your
Mhm.
dog, etc., and all that. There's
Right.
a ton of heated rhetoric, and so there's probably going to be a tendency to sort of overcorrect and go, well, okay, you promised me that, Trump would personally come to my house and kick me in the groin, and that hasn't happened yet.
Mhm.
Ergo, nothing bad is going to happen. And the truth is, it's not
Yeah.
that simple. There's always sort of that little middle part, in between those two.
Mhm.
We tend to sort of follow to one of the extremes, but there are sort of middle case scenarios for that. And like Satan mentioned, for instance, that hey, this might be the last sort of election you've got. Ironically, I
Mhm.
don't actually think that's potentially the case, mainly because Trump, him, as I sort of bring up in my article as well, Trump is fairly well versed with Erdogan, the current leader of
Mhm.
Turkey. And he has basically succeeded in the past for staying in power for the past 2 decades by sort of gradually chipping away at democratic processes within there, taking control of the
Mhm.
media, taking control of key parts of that, and pushing things on. So I think rather than actually sort of have this is the last election here, it might be the last. You've never really had fair elections down there for ages at this point. But
Right.
the point is, though, it's going to be more just taking gerrymandering and keeping pushing it further and
Mhm.
further ahead, using the power that Trump and the Republicans sort of have now to sort of push that even further than that. And then they turn around and say, "Well, you said there wasn't going to be any more elections, and here's an election." And
Mhm.
then like five Democrats are only allowed to get to the polls. It's
Right.
Yeah, I think that that actually is the more likely scenario. I do think that we're probably
Mhm.
going to have at least a sham election next time around, but it's like by
Yes.
then they will have disenfranchised so many people, taken
Mhm.
suppressed so many votes that unless even with just like a crazy massive overpowering majority of Democrats being all like, fuck this shit and like showing up
Mhm.
trying to vote, it
Right.
still won't break through the walls that they're going to put in place. And
Mhm.
it's just like, yeah, and the 30, like you said, Erdogan, like 20 years, like, yeah, I
Mhm.
could easily be that kind of scenario over here too. So it's
Right.
just like, and what I was trying to as far as the whole catastrophic aspect of that though, is as bad as Republican rule, fascist rule is going to be, like it may not be as bad as some people. I mean, it may be a lot more survivable than it's been made out to be. People can still live full lives, and some people are going to suffer, some people are going to die, and that is not a fucking joke, and it's not right.
Mhm.
But for the majority of people, they may be able to like continue the rest of their lives, going to their job, eating their cheeseburger, whatever, and like not really see that big of a difference. So, you know, I just I think it's really important to like make that case, because it's like because for the people that are felt like their entire life was going to be dusted off by this,
Mhm.
and that like for a lot of that us that's not the case, and we like you don't need to like certainly you don't want to like do anything rash during this particular moment in time,
Right.
off of the sense of hopelessness that's been instilled by these like extremely inflated fears. Um, there's still a lot of things that people can do to fight for what's right,
Mhm.
and even with the fascists in power, and it's gonna be a long ass road. Like there's war every day till the end of time, but like within that we can still have our flowers grow, and
Right.
you know that's all.
That's actually a good natural transition because I mean, I think we haven't quite sort of settled on what exactly caused it. And there's probably no one cause, whatever. But I think probably the most valuable sort of thing we can sort of think of here is okay, what happens next? We're in this shit situation. We've got, a couple of months until, Trump officially sort of gets the reins of the presidency itself. This gives us sort of like a little bit of a breathing window. First, to sort of get over the shock results of the election itself, but also plan and formulate to figure out what exactly we're going to do. I think Satan is exactly right. There's still quite a bit we actually can do, even in this scenario, to at least blunt the impact of in some
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah. I mean, basically, if you do nothing, the worst case scenario will happen. But if you put up some resistance, like protests or running or I don't know, refusing to obey illegal orders, that creates resistance and blunted and maybe can be a holding action. So the worst thing you can do is nothing and just preemptively submit.
Hmm. Oh yeah, you've read on you've at least read the first chapter of On Tyranny as well. I take it.
Yep.
Now, everybody quotes that because that's the only serif chapter that's free to read online. But yeah, no, that is also a good point. Like, don't just roll over and expose your belly on first go. No, no, no. Just stand up for what you think is correct and right, and don't preemptively cede ground. Like one thing I was really pissed about to read is that Jack Smith sort of, sorry, he's the main prosecutor of the Trump election interference right now, if I
Mhm.
recall correctly. Again, Americans correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
He actually sort of did a filing where he sort of signaled to the court that he was actually going to be winding down prosecution of
Mhm.
things and all that. And I was like, whoa, 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 no, 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 no. No, you've got 3 months.
Mhm.
Carry on full throttle for now.
Mhm.
If Trump puts his handpicked AG into place and they fire you, Okay, fine. But don't give up now. Keep on pushing.
I think that it's important for people to do things that are going to fail when they make a statement, and that prosecution is going to fail, of course. I mean, like whether even if it succeeds, it fails, because like all Trump has to do is just like say and then pardon himself in 2 minutes, right?
Right.
But it's if do you want to like stand up for what you were standing up for? Finish what you started, guys.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's also sort of important to sort of look at some of the tactics that have been deployed against, liberals and progressives in the United States as well too, and not
Mhm.
necessarily in the sort of rhetoric, oh, we're going to just, shame them, slime them, and all that.
No.
If you look at, especially at the right wing itself, what it's really sort of done is sort of gone down to the local levels. In fact,
Mhm.
my original plan for that gradualism post was I was actually going to link back to an earlier one I had made about, sort of, hey, focusing on local power and all that. Turns out, though,
Mhm.
that post was actually about going local when it comes to the atheist skeptic movement. And I was kind of like, not really sort of the good link there. But
Right.
if you actually look at other things outside of the presidential election, like,
Mhm.
for instance, the abortion amendments that were all on the ballot. I think there was
Right.
something like nine or something that was being presented like that. And of those,
Mhm.
seven of them passed. So seven states now have, greater protections
Mhm.
for people getting abortions overall. And a
Mhm.
lot of people sort of point out, well, Florida, it didn't pass over there and all that. But if you look at the details, the
Mhm.
law says that in order for one of these amendments to pass, it has to get 60% of the vote. In
Right.
Florida, it got about 57 or 58% of the vote.
Mhm.
95% of the way there. So there's still widespread spread support for that. There just wasn't enough to get it past that post and in
Mhm.
there. So, when it comes to policies, there's wide support for progressive policies. It's just
Mhm.
because it sort of gets hidden behind partisanship, those policies
Right.
don't necessarily get enacted. And of course, there's the whole, if you're in a gerrymandered district, your
Mhm.
politician doesn't really have to care about that sort of thing. They just sort of don't get primaried and they're all A-okay. So if
Sure.
you are frustrated and wondering what to do, this is a great thing to actually sort of do is focus on lower levels of government. The federal government is going to be lost, but you've got significant sway over your in the U.S. case, your state level, and
Mhm.
especially in the United States, municipalities are fairly independent as well too. So you can also make a huge impact lobbying on the municipal level as well too, getting more progressive policies in there, and that will actually help staunch the harm that a far right federal government could do.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think
For
sure, go ahead.
okay. Yeah, just basically, sure, Trump's one person, but to be a fascist, he needs the help of others. And warning for local government is a way to blunt that power. That's my point.
He does have like a big backers with big pockets, with big brains, even like putting the shit together to make sure that fascism happens and stays. But even within that, they're just like the structure. If they want to play it cool, like HA was saying, like the gradualism style, and I think that that's probably what they're gonna do. Then they're gonna be leaving enough laws in place that that give room for local areas that lean skew progressive to still be able to like do a lot of things that help their people. So that is a positive, even though but that the thing he said there that William said about like how they need to have you need people. Uh it's very easy in this country for conservatives to have an outside influence on the government and then via the media, like on the people to some extent. But there's like the worst things, right? There's bad things, right? Like abortion bans and stuff like that, right? But the worst things, like like we're gonna like straight up concentration camps, all this other kind of stuff like that. Those require like more than just law. They require an actual majority. They need the support of the people in order to happen. Because if you like just say like, to a bunch of people who haven't like been primed for this yet, okay, everybody, now tell us where your Jewish neighbors are and let's get them on the trains. Like even in Kansas, like 90% of people aren't going to fucking do that. So it's like the very worst things that people fear, I don't think that they're going to end up materializing, and that's part of the reason why gradualism is going to work, because like it's like you just we go all like, oh, look what's going to happen, and then like it doesn't happen, and then they go like, well, Democrats are full of shit, this is awesome. So
Yeah.
and then they just
Yeah.
like get away with the creep. But it's just but the plus side of that is that, yeah, I don't think that we're like going to be seeing like massive bloodbaths. I mean, aside from like, shootings, which is going to increase again like it did last time.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Oh shoot, I
oh
had a
it
point and then just completely forgot it. So go ahead,
oh
Sage.
sorry.
Go ahead, Greg.
One more thing on too is that like that's all within just talking about the law and what's legal and stuff like that. What about like what's illegal? And I think William alluded to that too, which is basically like, if you're willing to take whatever consequences have come down for it, you could do anything you want to.
Mhm.
And there are cultural situations in which in which like the penalties, whatever penalties the government tries to dream up, will never fucking land. Like the Haight-Ashbury district in San Francisco, they're not going back to being arrested for sodomy there. It's not fucking happening, no matter what the federal government says, right? And likewise, I mean, I'm gonna have some posts coming up about this before long, but it's
Sure.
just like, if the law sucks, break the law, and you're gonna there's gonna be a lot of chances to do that, and a lot of y'all are doing it anyways already. So keep
Mhm.
up the good work.
Yeah, I seem to remember there's this thing called civil disobedience that you Americans have a
Mhm.
bit of a history with. You
Yeah.
might want to consider something like that potentially, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, there was
Right.
also that movie literally called How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which made a bit of
Mhm.
a splash, I think a couple of years ago. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say, okay, don't do something illegal, but it's important to point out that, slavery
Mhm.
was, you know, what's legal and what's legal is not necessarily what's moral.
Right.
So bear that distinction in mind. And, you can actually, this was a big part of it is, break the law when it makes sense to break the law and when you can make a moral case for that. If
Mhm.
it is an immoral law, break the law, accept the consequences from that. And that's important too. It's not just a, oh,
Yes.
I'm going to break this law and get away with it, la, 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 la. No,
Mhm.
there's going to be consequences.
But do get away with it if you can.
I'm trying not to get us, shut down, okay, admittedly,
Right.
as the Canadian, I don't really care, but, I gotta think about everybody else here. And I
Mhm.
mean, as a Canadian, I'm sort of an honorary American in some sense. So, yeah. But
Sure.
yeah, yeah, civil disobedience. Look it up.
Right.
Look at what works. And
Mhm.
try and learn quite a bit from the past as well.
Yeah.
And
So
Walk out sort
it's
of it.
depressing to be learning from the past, because it means that basically like shit didn't get better, you know. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and unfortunately, it doesn't
It's.
always get better. It doesn't always get worse in the same way either. A
Mhm.
mass surveillance and things like that. That's one thing we've now got to be much more aware of. Or like an
Mhm.
entire social network, which has now sort of become essentially, Republican propaganda. Versus
Right.
where it was just sort of slightly, whereas it was slightly like right leaning before. Now it's pretty much just
Mhm.
full on MAGA.
Right.
And another
Yeah.
thing I do want to point out as well too, I do have some anarchists in my sort of social media hangouts as well too, and they
Mhm.
haven't been, all that sort of plussed, nonplussed by the election itself. Some of it is, I mean, one of them is a
Mhm.
Canadian, so like, why exactly does he care about the
Right.
U.S. election? But they also sort of make a point in that for them, they've never sort of treated the state as legitimate. It's actually always been local action, getting your local organizations and all that going. So when the government
Mhm.
sort of turns against you, um, it's it doesn't really sort of matter to them. They're always sort of assuming that the government is against them, and they're always sort of making their decisions and
Mhm.
routing in that sense.
I fucking hate those guys. the anarchists. I mean, I am an anarchist to some extent. I guess it makes sense that anarchists would hate anarchists, right? The
Right.
way they do. But yeah, I mean, a lot of them are accelerationists, where they're just all like, they don't care if everybody dies as long as it gives them a chance to like push their agenda. But
Right.
I do think that we need to get a lot more serious about making systems that are outside of the law. And I'm going to have at least a few posts about that over in the next however long, at least one that I got planned. But
Yeah.
right, like we there's people, the people that are talking about environmentalism and stuff, and like the problems that are going on in the world, of mutual support was like a really kind of a catchphrase for a while. And there was a lot of emphasis on like, oh, what if we can like, come up with some kind of way to subsistence farm locally to help reduce starvation and all this other kind of stuff, right?
Right.
That right. I think that it's hard to make that sort of thing happen. Like on my suburban cul-de-sac here, I think it's a really safe bet. Like an immoderate number of these people voted for Trump, even in this blue state. Um, and they don't know me from Adam, Diana, whoever, and they don't. I mean, like they we're all trained to be paranoid of each other, and I think that ends up gaining some legitimacy too. So but somehow we need to like break through that barrier, break through the shyness and the anxiety and the divisions that have been wrought by individualism and stuff like that, to figure out how we can build as many systems as possible that don't rely on the state, the federal, fucking any government whatso fucking ever, right? We need to like come up with ways to take care of our own people that just assume that the world's already moved on. Something that'll last even if even if everything else falls. We need to like there's the shadow governments are illegal. There was this like weird like crazy libertarian town that got overrun by hogs with flaming cop cars on the mayor's lawn and stuff like that in Texas. And like one of the things that happened was like some of the people that were from before the libertarian takeover were trying to form a shadow government that met in a bowling alley. And this is real shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, they got arrested for trying to form a shadow government. But I say
Unsurprisingly.
shadow government, yes. Shadow everything, yes. Shadow supermarket. I want to go to the fucking shadow supermarket to buy my fucking shadow groceries.
I mean,
It's way past time. Shadow
Yeah.
social security, shadow everything.
yeah, and Amazon does not count as a shadow, grocery store. I just want to say
No.
that.
And I'm just saying, in general, taking a step back, it's important to have community and support. I think fascism thrives when people feel isolated and can't trust each other. So, another way to fight back, community.
I can't say I even begin to have a solution of like how an idea of how we're going to do this, but I want to start trying to do it. For my part, I'm kind of a William, you're
Yeah.
writer, artist, right? I think that self-publishing is an example of trying to go outside of existing systems that like shut out voices and elevate only the people that went to the right MFA and stuff like that, right? So it's
Exactly.
like an entire artistic system that's capable of achieving a lot big success without relying on the man and what he says. It's challenging because like the channels are all in like Amazon or whatever, right? Which is bad. But it's possibilities. It's possibilities. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out. Well, we got to figure it out.
Yeah, the possibilities are there. I mean, I go wide, I mean, which means I'm not on KU, so I'm not dependent on Amazon. So, but yeah, the possibilities there. And some people do very well, and even if you don't, you get your work out there.
Shadow publishing.
Shadow publishing.
Like, well, and I've got one thing I could potentially suggest too. Again, sort of fitting in with my theory for that, and this is mostly for the white guys in the audience, although to some extent the white women too as well. I mean, my theory was that calling Trump sexist, racist, etc., and all that didn't actually move the needle because people on some level were okay with that. And you can take that as a pessimistic sort of, oh my God, Trump's always going to get 74 million votes, things aren't going to change, blah, 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 blah. Or you can kind of listen to what people of color have been saying for ages that, hey, maybe you should be an anti racist of some sort. Now, this might be another actually way to get around it. People of color have been saying this for ages. Women have also been saying this as well too. We as white men, or we as men, or we as white people, have access to spaces that people of color, that women do not have access to. And we have influence that they don't have as well too. Maybe it's time to actually, sort of step up and try and push back against sexism, racism, etc. Rather than sort of pushing it all off on some, okay, this is some magical, we cast some magical vote and it's going to fix everything and all things are going to be
Right.
fine, blah, blah.
I
No,
think
no.
I think I have a really solid idea of like the central issue there and what could be done about it. If particularly anybody that's got children in their lives, that's where you got to start with it. Anything you can do to humanize people, and it's like you can't just like not dehumanize it. You have to like actively try to humanize because your unconscious biases are working against that fucking
Right.
badly. I've definitely been subject to that where I've like treated people badly without having any fucking intention of doing so. And I know it was because of my unconscious biases. You have to like actively go out of your way to see anybody that you know is on a different from yourself as being the same as yourself, at least having their own agency, their own wishes, their own desires, their own life, and like and understand it. And that goes for men understanding women, cis people understanding trans people, and people understanding people of other races.
Yeah. And the important thing is not just to sit down and understand, it's to make sure other people of, other white men, other white people, other men, etc., actually go through and are educated on this as well too. You have to step up and educate these people. You can't just sit back and let's say trans people, educate non-trans people about the situation a lot. Trans people do not make up a large share of the population. They're very easy to ignore, unfortunately, just because of that small share. Cis people are not. And so it's time to sort of stand up and actually talk about that. And if that seems like, oh God, we can't actually solve sexism or racism, blah, 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 you don't have to. US presidential elections are so close, margins are divided by 1 or 2%. All you have to do is get one or two people over. And if everybody actually sort of steps up and does that one or two little bits, that could potentially sway the entire election in the next 4 years. And again, you got 4 years to work on this.
Right.
Setting up mutual aid and all that, maybe, that's going to be a little bit tricky for some people. Everybody has a racist uncle. Everybody has, that sexist parent and all that they
Yes.
can sort of work on and get brought over to that side. It's much more concrete. It's much easier to do in that sense. Will it have an impact? I don't know. I'm just sort of, this is my theory potentially on it. But you should be doing it anyway, quite frankly.
And it's more important now than it ever has been.
Quite.
Okay.
All right. Any other ideas on how we could potentially change things? Because, I mean, certainly, I would love to have, like, basically, instead of only U.S. citizens can vote in the U.S. election, the entire world can vote in the U.S. election.
The accelerationists that I encounter online, they're posed as being a narco whatever, and they just discourage people from voting in the United States. A lot of them do that from the comfort of Brazil or Argentina or Croatia. And this is why I think that like there's definitely an element of interference that was involved as well. Like, and some of it would have been paid for. We know for a fact that Russia was paying for right-wing YouTubers to promote their side. Well, if these anarcho assholes that were saying that it was okay not to vote from these other countries were not getting a fucking paycheck to do that, well, they were doing bitch work for free and are chumps. But like just like what did I say about that shit? I lost the plot on it. I'm sorry. I'm just done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, push back on misinformation as well, as you see it as well.
Yes. Okay. That was if in social media spaces we got to stop like be more critical of the people that are that are popular, that are like, oh, this person always does the funniest memes and stuff like that. Oh, they always say stuff that seems wise and compassionate and stuff like that, but then they say some whack shit that's going to get people fucking killed. Maybe stop fucking reblogging their ass. Maybe block them, blacklist them, like smear their fucking name from like hell to breakfast, That's how about that?
You
Good
can't
old
do that.
cancellation.
Promote positive people.
Hmm.
Yeah, that
Exactly.
too.
You know, find if you yourself can't help, maybe you can donate to an organization which is helping out, you know. Maybe
Hmm.
you can just, you know, on your own social media thing, promote, hey, here's some people actually promoting things for the good and all that. Take those
Right.
sort of small steps because again, with the US election, we're talking with small margins and all that.
Hmm.
Every little bit helps, you know, and you should not be afraid to do that just because you feel it's too small, you know, which may not do it. Do it
I guess
anyway.
the last thing I would like to say is that as dire as it can is as it is and as it can be, and as much as it is possible that fascism is going to lock this down, there is still at least a slight chance that the a democracy in the United States can turn itself around next time. There is still, as of this moment at least, a very slight possibility of that happening. It's like a fucking candle in the wind. It can go, but um it's still possible. We got to not be doomers about it and do everything that we can. Because even if we don't actually succeed, even if it is
Hmm.
just basically over for democracy for 25 years, 40 years, whatever, the things that we do in order to try to make to win, like for example, like
Hmm.
trying to like get your racist grandma like on to stop being racist, that's still a
Hmm.
net benefit to the world. You still made the world a better place. Things that you can do to
Hmm.
try to win, they don't have to actually succeed in order to have a positive effect. So do
Hmm.
everything you fucking can.
Mhm.
Right. Block them or delay them. The harder they have to work, fascists have to work, they'll move on to something that's easier.
Yeah. Again, and don't think that it's too small or too ineffectual and all that. Don't let that discourage you. If it's something you should be doing anyway, just do it, you know.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're about time to wrap up the stream as well too. So I might as well get some final thoughts from everybody, and when you're giving your final thoughts as well too, also give you the social media shout backs and all that. This time around, actually, I'm gonna put William Brinkman on the spot and all that to, you know, promote your wares and give us final thoughts too. So
Yep, I'm on freethoughtblogs.com. Bloomberg Babbler Stories is my series, but final thoughts are, I mean, there's a risk of the library censorship we've seen locally going national. So, but I intend to keep writing as long as possible, and that's my resistance.
cool, cool. All right, let's give you words then, Satan. I'm sure Satan has some great ideas.
I mean, the part of the reason why I was just being such a bully in the conversation this last like 20 minutes is because that was kind of my closing thoughts. Yeah, you can
Hmm.
check out my series on freethoughtblogs.com/gas. It should be running through at least like the sort of late next week sometime. And see me trying to be positive.
Nice, nice. All right. Yes, I have my own blog as well too, Reprobate Spreadsheet, and I actually posted something for once. It's fascinating that I've actually contributed to the blog network, which is wild. But yeah, you know, again, my sort of closing thoughts is as terrible as things are, try and find ways to make things just a little bit better. You know, there's always small things you can do to make things just ever so slightly better, and look to those things. Even if you can't solve, you know, world peace, world hunger, etc., and all that, there's always some small little positive steps you can take. And even if that, you know, still winds up not being as much as you would like to do or all that, it's still sort of worth taking in the end. Right. So I think that is a perfect time to close off. So, PZ, you may stop the stream whenever you would like. I wish I had sort of some nice outro thing to play. So I don't know, just throw some, pretend there's some music or something going on in the background, and we'll all sort of, I don't know, jigger. I don't know. Just shut off the stream, PZ. Go, go, go.
Still says song on it. It's still, I don't know.
But yeah, but I mean, PZ also has to hit the. It's not just a simple matter of, yeah, it's still streaming, but.
It's